The first time I learned my brother had stolen 12 years of my life, I was sitting in a military courtroom, not because I was on trial, because he was. My mother's hand flew to her mouth the moment she saw me. My father looked like he'd seen a ghost, and my older brother, Ryan, turned so pale, I thought he might pass out right there at the defense table. I'd imagined seeing my family again. I just never imagined it would happen like this. Not after 12 years of silence. Not after 12 years of missed birthdays, unanswered letters, and Christmas cards that disappeared into a void. And definitely not while I was wearing the uniform they believed I'd abandoned. The courtroom was quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Military quiet. The kind of silence built from rules, procedure, and consequences. Every footstep echoed. Every paper sounded louder than it should. I walked to the review table, carrying a thick case file under my arm. My shoes clicked against the polished floor. One step, then another. The sound seemed to pull every eye in the room toward me. I placed the file on the table, opened it, sat down. Only then did I look back. There they were, third row, my parents, older, smaller, more tired than I remembered. My mother stared at the insignia on my uniform. My father kept blinking like his brain was struggling to process what he was seeing. Because according to my brother, I wasn't supposed to be there. According to Ryan, I had quit years ago, failed, given up, walked away. That lie had cost me my family. And now it was sitting at the defense table. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 37 years old, a Navy commander. And the man about to lose everything was my brother. But to understand why that courtroom mattered, you need to understand where it started. A town called Millfield. Population barely 10,000. The kind of place where everybody knows your business before you do. Ryan was the golden child. For years older. Captain of the football team. Popular. Funny. The guy everyone remembered. Teachers loved him. Neighbors loved him. My parents adored him. He could charm his way out of almost anything. I was the opposite. Quiet, focused, serious. The kid who spent weekends reading instead of partying. The kid adults described as responsible, which sounds like a compliment until you realize it usually means boring. Growing up, Ryan never seemed threatened by me. Why would he be? He had everything. Attention, friends, confidence. But things changed when I turned 19. That's when I enlisted, not because I had no options. I had a college acceptance letter sitting on my desk. I joined because I wanted purpose, structure, a challenge. I wanted to build something nobody could take away. I still remember telling my parents. We were sitting at the kitchen table. Mom cried. Dad shook my hand. Both said they were proud. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Ryan wasn't there that night. He'd moved out months earlier. Drifting between jobs, making excuses, always promising that his big break was right around the corner. 3 weeks later, I left for boot camp, and everything changed. Training was brutal, but I loved it. For the first time, effort mattered more than popularity. Results mattered more than charm. I wrote home every week. My mother wrote back constantly. Long letters, pages and pages. My father sent shorter messages. Usually only a few lines, but they meant everything to me. For 8 months, life was good. Hard, but good. Then Christmas arrived. I got approved for leave. I drove home excited to surprise everyone. I imagined hugs, stories, a family dinner, maybe even hearing my father say he was proud again. Instead, I found my father waiting at the front door with disappointment written all over his face. And before I could even step inside, he said something that changed my life. We raised you better than this. I had no idea what he was talking about. And behind him, standing in the hallway, my brother was smiling. I stood frozen on the porch. What are you talking about? I asked. My father's expression hardened. Ryan told us everything. My stomach dropped. Everything? What everything? I looked past him. Ryan was standing in the hallway with his arms crossed. Not angry, not embarrassed, just calm, almost sad, like someone delivering bad news. Ethan, he said quietly, you don't have to keep pretending. Pretending? I felt like I had walked into the wrong house. I have no idea what you're talking about. Ryan sighed. The performance was convincing. Too convincing. You told me the Navy wasn't working out. You said you were leaving. I stared at him. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. I never said that. My father stepped forward. Stop. The disappointment in his voice hit harder than yelling ever could. We don't care that you failed. Failed. There it was. The word, the accusation, the lie. My mother appeared behind him. Her eyes were full of sympathy. The kind people give someone they believe is broken. Sweetheart, it's okay, she said softly. You don't have to be embarrassed. I felt my chest tighten. 8 months. 8 months of service. 8 months of letters. 8 months of sacrifice. And somehow my brother had convinced them I had quit. I looked at Ryan. Tell them. His eyes met mine. For a second I expected guilt. Instead, he slowly shook his head. That was when I understood. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. He had done this on purpose. I never left the Navy. My father folded his arms. Ryan wouldn't lie about something like that. Those words hurt more than anything else. Not because he trusted Ryan. Because he didn't trust me. Not even enough to ask questions. Not even enough to hear my side. The decision had already been made. The verdict was already in. And I wasn't welcome. I can show you my orders. Nobody answered. I can show you my service record. Silence. I can literally prove I'm still serving. Ryan looked down at the floor. My mother looked away. And my father stepped back inside. The message was clear. Conversation over. Then he closed the door. Right in my face. I stood there for several seconds. Just staring. Waiting for someone to open it. Waiting for someone to realize how ridiculous this was. Nobody did. The porch suddenly felt very cold. Eventually I turned around, walked back to my car, and drove away. I spent Christmas alone in a cheap motel 20 miles away. The room smelled like old carpet and cigarette smoke. The television barely worked. The heater rattled all night. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. At first I was angry, then confused, then hurt. But around midnight something changed. The emotion disappeared. Not completely. Just enough. A strange calm settled over me. A realization. I couldn't force people to believe me. I couldn't force my family to trust me. And I couldn't spend the rest of my life trying to prove something that was already true. So I made a decision. I would stop chasing them. If they wanted the truth, they could ask for it. Until then, I would focus on my future. The next morning I returned to base, and I threw myself into work. While my family believed I had failed, I was quietly building the life Ryan said didn't exist. The years started passing. 1 deployment became 2. 2 became 4. Promotions followed. Responsibilities grew. My career moved forward. And every December, I mailed a Christmas card home. No accusations. No explanations. Just a simple message. Thinking of you. Hope you're well. Year after year. No response. Not one. By year 3, when the cards came back. Return to sender. I kept it. Not because I was bitter. Because I wanted a reminder. A reminder of what happens when lies go unchallenged. Most people assume rejection destroys you. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it builds you. Every achievement became fuel. Every disappointment became motivation. I made officer, then senior officer, then command staff. The kid, who supposedly couldn't handle military life, kept moving higher. Meanwhile, my family remained strangers. Then one day something happened that changed everything. I met a little girl named Ava, my daughter, and for the first time in years, I stopped wondering whether my family would ever come back, because I finally had one of my own. Ava was born during my 7th year in the Navy. The relationship with her mother didn't last. There was no betrayal, no screaming matches, no dramatic ending. Just 2 people who wanted different futures. We separated respectfully and focused on raising our daughter. Ava became the center of my world. Every decision I made after that included her. Every promotion, every deployment, every sacrifice. I wanted her to grow up knowing something I hadn't learned until much later in life. Your value isn't determined by who believes in you. It's determined by what you do when nobody does. By then, my military career was thriving. I earned promotions faster than most people expected. I took every difficult assignment offered, every leadership course, every deployment, every challenge. Not because I was trying to prove Ryan wrong anymore. At some point, that stopped mattering. I was building something for myself, for Ava, for the future. Still, every December I mailed a Christmas card. No return address. No expectations. Just a short note. Hope you're doing well. Sometimes I wondered if my parents read them. Sometimes I wondered if Ryan threw them away before they ever reached the mailbox. Most of the time, I tried not to think about it. Years passed. Ava learned to ride a bike. Started school. Lost her first tooth. Won her first spelling bee. Every milestone reminded me of everything my parents were missing. Not because I wanted revenge. Because they genuinely would have loved her. Ava had my mother's smile. My father's stubbornness. The irony wasn't lost on me. One evening after promotion ceremony, Ava climbed into my lap and looked at the silver insignia on my uniform. "Is that important?" she asked. "A little." She nodded seriously. "Good job, Dad." That was it. No speech. No celebration. Just those 3 words. Good job, Dad. And somehow they meant more than every award I'd ever received. That night after she went to bed, I sat on my balcony looking at the ocean, thinking about all the years that had passed. 12 years. An entire childhood. An entire relationship. Gone. Destroyed by a single lie. A lie my parents never bothered to verify. I told myself I was over it. Most days I believed that. Then February arrived, and everything changed. It started like any other Monday. Coffee, emails, reports, meetings, routine. I arrived at my office just before 0700. A stack of investigation files was waiting on my desk. Most were standard reviews, documentation issues, compliance checks, nothing unusual. Then one file caught my attention. The name on the cover made my stomach tighten instantly. Carter Ryan J. For several seconds, I just stared at it. Surely it couldn't be him. There are lots of Carters. Lots of Ryans. I opened the file. Date of birth. Matched. Hometown. Matched. Military service record. Matched. My brother. After spending 12 years convincing our parents I had failed in the Navy, Ryan had joined the Navy himself. 5 years after I enlisted. 5 years after destroying my relationship with our family. I leaned back in my chair. The irony was almost unbelievable. Then I started reading. The further I got, the worse it became. This wasn't a routine review. This was a major investigation. Fraud. Falsified documentation. Missing equipment. Unauthorized approvals. Dozens of violations. The file was thick. Really thick. Someone had spent months building this case. According to the investigation, Ryan had signed off on equipment inspections that never happened. Approved shipments that couldn't be verified. Certified inventory that investigators couldn't locate. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of discrepancies. The evidence was overwhelming. Witness statements, audit reports, digital records, signatures, timelines. Everything pointed back to him. I sat there in silence, not angry, not happy, just stunned, because for the first time in 12 years, Ryan wasn't protected by charm. He wasn't protected by family. He wasn't protected by excuses. Documents don't care who your parents love more. Evidence doesn't care who tells a better story. Facts are stubborn things, and the facts look terrible. At 8:15, my commanding officer called me into his office. The moment I walked in, I knew what he was going to ask. "You've seen the Carter file?" "Yes, sir." He studied me for a moment. "He's your brother?" "Yes, sir." The room became quiet. Then he asked the question I had already been asking myself. "Do you want to recuse yourself?" Part of me wanted to say yes. Walk away. Let someone else handle it. Let someone else sit across from Ryan. Let someone else deal with the ghost waiting inside that file. But another part of me knew something important. For 12 years, I'd been running from this story. Maybe it was finally time to face it. I looked my commander in the eye. "No, sir." He nodded slowly. "Then be ready." I didn't understand what he meant until he said the next sentence. "His next of kin notification has already been sent." I froze. My parents were coming. For the first time in 12 years. I was about to see them again. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning. I didn't sleep much the night before. Not because I was nervous about Ryan. The evidence against him was overwhelming. That part was straightforward. What kept me awake was the thought of seeing my parent again. 12 years. 12 birthdays. 12 Christmases. 12 years of silence. And tomorrow we'd all be in the same room. I sat at my kitchen table long after midnight, reviewing the case file. Most of it was exactly what I'd already seen. Audit reports, witness statements, inventory records, electronic approvals, the kind of paperwork that quietly destroys careers. Then I reached a section I hadn't paid much attention to earlier: personnel records, administrative correspondence, routine documents. Normally nothing interesting, but one page caught my eye. A letter written by Ryan, dated 7 years earlier. I frowned and started reading. Halfway through the first paragraph, I stopped breathing. The letter wasn't about the investigation. It wasn't about equipment, or inventory, or military business. It was about me. My hands tightened around the page. Ryan had written to my parents, and in that letter, he admitted everything. Everything. The lie, the jealousy, the manipulation, the reason our family had fallen apart. He confessed that I had never quit, that I had never failed, that he had invented the story because he couldn't handle watching our parents be proud of me. I read the paragraph 3 times, then a 4th, then a 5th, not because I didn't understand it, because I couldn't believe it. The date stared back at me. 7 years ago. 7 years ago. My parents had known the truth for 7 years. The proof was right there. Delivery confirmation attached. Received. Signed for. Documented. My father had read it. My mother had read it. And neither of them had contacted me. Not once. I sat back in my chair and stared at the wall. The original lie hurt. But this was different. This meant they had a chance to fix everything. And chose not to. For 7 years they knew. For 7 years, they let the silence continue. For 7 years, I kept mailing Christmas cards. And for 7 years, they kept saying nothing. I wanted to be angry. Maybe I should have been. Instead, I just felt tired. Deeply tired. Eventually, I closed the file, went to bed, and waited for morning. The next day, I put on my dress uniform. Every ribbon, every medal, every insignia. A record of 12 years my parents never saw. As I adjusted my collar, Ava wandered into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. She looked at me for a moment. "You have a big meeting today?" Something like that. She nodded, then smiled. "You're going to do great." I laughed. "Thanks, kiddo." She grabbed a bowl of cereal and wandered away. Simple, easy, the kind of support I'd spent years wishing for. 2 hours later, I arrived at the courtroom. The hearing began exactly on schedule. Ryan entered with his attorney. He looked older, more tired, less confident. For the first time in his life, charm wasn't going to save him. Then the doors opened again. My parents walked in, and suddenly 12 years disappeared. My mother looked exactly where she expected Ryan to be. Then her eyes found me. The reaction was immediate. Her hand flew to her mouth. My father froze. Both of them stared at my uniform. The rank, the insignia, the ribbons, the proof. All the proof they had refused to believe. For a moment, nobody moved. Ryan noticed them staring. He turned, saw me, and his face went completely white. The hearing started. Witness after witness testified. Documents were presented. Reports reviewed. Facts established. The military has a way of stripping away emotion. Nobody yelled. Nobody argued. The evidence simply spoke for itself. And it was devastating. By lunchtime, the outcome was obvious. Ryan's career was over. During a short recess, I stepped into the hallway to get water. I heard footsteps behind me, then a voice I hadn't heard in over a decade. "Ethan!" My mother, I turned around slowly. She looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow. Her eyes were filled with tears. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she looked at my collar, at the insignia, at the uniform, and asked a question that broke something inside me. How long have you been serving? I stared at her, not because I didn't know the answer, because she didn't. 12 years. 12 years gone. And she genuinely didn't know. I swallowed. 12 years, Mom. The tears started immediately. Behind her, my father lowered his head. And for the first time since I was 19, neither of them had anything to say. Neither of them had anything to say. For 12 years, they had believed a lie. For 7 of those years, they had known the truth. And yet somehow, we had all ended up standing in a military courtroom watching the consequences unfold. The hearing resumed shortly afterward. Everyone returned to their seats. The evidence review continued. Witnesses spoke. Documents were entered into the record. Ryan barely looked up. The confidence I remembered from childhood was gone. No jokes, no charm, no easy smile. Just a tired man watching his life collapse one page at a time. By late afternoon, the panel had everything it needed. The findings were clear. Repeated falsification of records, failure to follow procedures, misrepresentation of inspections, the kind of violations that destroy trust. And in the military, trust is everything. The hearing ended without drama. No shouting, no last-minute surprises. Just facts. The room slowly emptied. Officers returned to work. Attorneys packed their files. Investigators gathered documents. Ryan remained seated for several moments after everyone else stood, like he wasn't ready to face what came next. Eventually, he walked into the hallway. My parents were waiting there. So was I. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then my father turned toward Ryan. His face looked older than it had that morning. Not angry, just exhausted. "Why?" he asked. One word. That's all. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. The same nervous habit he'd had since he was 12 years old. Nobody rescued him this time. Nobody changed the subject. Nobody made excuses. He had to answer. Finally, he looked at me, then at our parents, and said the one thing none of us expected, because I was jealous. The hallway went silent. I watched Ethan succeed at everything I couldn't. His voice shook. Every time Mom talked about one of his letters, every time Dad said he was proud, every time someone mentioned the Navy, he stopped, swallowed hard. I hated it. My mother started crying. Ryan looked away. I thought it would make me feel better if they stopped talking about him. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. I never meant for it to go this far. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because of course he didn't. Nobody ever plans the ending. They only plan the lie. Everything after that grows on its own. My father stared at him. You stole 12 years. Ryan didn't answer, because there was nothing to say. The truth was standing right there. 12 years. Gone. My mother looked at me through tears. Ethan, I knew what was coming. An apology. An explanation. A desperate attempt to fix something that should have been fixed years ago. I raised a hand gently. Not today. She stopped. I wasn't angry. I wasn't interested in punishment. I was simply tired. The hearing had ended. Ryan's career was over. Nothing anyone said in that hallway could give me back 12 years. But something unexpected happened. For the first time, I didn't want those years back. Because while my family was gone, my life hadn't stopped. I had built a career. I had earned my rank. I had become someone I was proud of. Most importantly, I had Ava. That evening I picked her up from school. She jumped into the car, carrying a drawing she'd made. "Dad!" I smiled. "Hey, kiddo. Did your meeting go okay?" I looked at her. The little girl who knew nothing about lies, courtrooms, or family drama. The little girl who only cared whether I was coming home for dinner. And suddenly I knew exactly what mattered. "Yeah," I said. "It went okay." She grinned. "Good." Then she handed me the drawing. It showed the two of us standing next to a giant Navy ship. Above our heads, she'd written 3 words. "My hero, Dad." I stared at it for a moment, then laughed quietly. Not because I was emotional, because life has a strange way of balancing itself. Ryan spent 12 years trying to make me smaller. Instead, those years made me stronger. A week later, my parents came to visit. The conversation wasn't magical. There was no movie-style reunion, no perfect apology, no instant healing. Real life doesn't work that way. Trust isn't rebuilt in a single afternoon. 12 years can't be erased by one conversation. But it was a start. My mother brought my favorite pot roast. My father spent an hour listening to Ava explain Navy ranks using hand-drawn charts. For the first time in a very long time, we sat at the same table. Not because everything was fixed, because everyone finally knew the truth. As I watched Ava laugh at her grandparents, I realized something. The most important chapter of my life wasn't the one Ryan stole. It was the one I built afterward. And that chapter, nobody could take away.